Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, a place where dreams take flight, with authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives and meaningful conversations, where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover world-class education, entertainment, hope and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our channel, USA Global TV. Download our app, USA Global TV. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. Thanks to our founder and executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Music score by Yeffy Tang from Cloud Road Music. Voiceover artist Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. USA Global TV and Radio. Your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited.
You're living an active, productive, healthy life. And one day you get pains in your stomach, or you get a fever, or you don't have a lot of energy. Something happens and you don't feel right. You just don't feel the same. And you go to the doctor after a long process usually, and you get some kind of diagnosis that you have ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, IBD, and everything changes. We're here to talk about that today on Take Steps and Kick IBD. And joining me is someone who understands this journey, also one of our team members here at USA Global TV and Radio. Let's welcome Kimberly Schaefer. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, Dr. Jacalyn. Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What about what I just shared really resonates with you?
I think it's the idea that you feel like you're normal and things are going along normally, and then all of a sudden your world gets turned upside down, and you may or may not know why. You might know that you hurt, but you may or may not have a diagnosis. Your doctors may or may not take you seriously. And so it can lead to not only the pain and dealing with the disease, but also wondering about your own mental health. Like, am I making this up? And so it's just a confusing time.
I think confusing is the optimal word. Confusing, embarrassing, shameful. We could go through so many different things. And yet here we are today, each of us walking our own path, taking our own steps and showing the world that you can be productive even when you get a diagnosis. So my story is different than yours, is different than someone else's. And so you have had a very successful career. At what point did you think maybe this diagnosis was going to change and upend all of that?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. I have been blessed with a great career. So for me, it happened in my late 20s. I had been having symptoms for many years before that. And I was in graduate school at Ohio State University. I had gone many times to the Student Health Center with complaints, and they told me I was depressed. And they said, you're from California, you're in a very demanding PhD program, and you're under stress. And so these are stress symptoms. And they actually gave me advice that's a direct opposite of what someone with Crohn's disease should do. They told me to eat more roughage, take Metamucil twice a day. I was put on antidepressants and told that that would make it better. So for a long time, I really thought that it was a mental illness on my part. So I didn't receive the diagnosis until I literally almost died. I weighed 60 pounds less than I do right now. And I went into the hospital and stayed there for 6 months when I was 26 years old. So for me, it came on very, very quickly. And I would say over the period of 2 weeks from the time that someone took my disease seriously, identified it, and started at least care. There wasn't a treatment, but care at that point.
Kimberly, thank you for being brave and for sharing that. And I've heard your story and I never heard it to that degree. So what I'm really moved by what you shared is the fact that we can actually seek help. We actually take the steps to go and get help from people who are medically educated, trained, have degrees, certifications in these types of things, licenses, and they tell us, you're crazy. There's something wrong with you. It's not anything that you have to worry about. we have another show here. This is Flocks with Talia Smith, and she brings people on, and it's the same thing. And then you get labeled in the system as having some kind of medical condition. I'm not saying you, I'm saying in general, people can. And then it's hard to get around that to actually get the treatment. And then the symptoms get worse because now you feel like, okay, not only do I have these symptoms, but obviously I must be crazy. What did you do when you went to the doctor and you didn't get the information that actually was beneficial?
Part of what happened to me is I kept being persistent. I kept going to the doctor. I kept showing up to the emergency room and just saying something isn't right. And I kept seeking help. And thankfully, my mother was still alive at that point. I was living here in San Diego where I am now, and she lived here also. And so she would continually take me to the doctor, and we would go to different doctors to try to figure out what was going on. And I just did not give up. I was sure that there was something was not right. And everything they told me to do, including eating more roughage and taking the Metamucil, which again causes so much pain and so much damage to people with IBD. So I just kept going. And at the same time, in my mind, I really thought that I had a mental problem. Even on top of that, I just thought something is not right in my head. And that causes a lot of self-doubt, especially when you're a young woman in your 20s trying to find your way and figure out who you are.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I know even thinking about it, it might be painful to go back there, but I appreciate you telling the story because we want to help people. We want to bring education and awareness. And I remember when I got the diagnosis, I was with my mother and I was over at the University of Pennsylvania. And when the doctor gave me the diagnosis, I remember he was talking. I could see his lips moving and I could hear what he was saying. But all I could think about was my life was over, that I would never be loved, trying to be a woman, attractive and wear nice clothes. I was hideous and that no one would ever love me again. And I felt like that for a very long time. It really had major impact because these diseases in and of themselves, they call them the bathroom diseases, right? And they're not attractive on any level. And I've seen people laughing at people who've gone through situations. And I've shared with you, I've lost control of my bowels in public. I've had to wear diapers and there's nothing hot or sexy about it. And when you see someone else that you know, and it goes in your own life or it happens to you, things change. People change their attitude instead of sitting and looking down on people. So what was your experience like that when you told people, or did you? What did you do with the information about the diagnosis?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I'm so sorry that you had to go through that as well. It's very difficult at any age, much less when you're a young person trying to figure things out. And for me, mine was a little bit compounded because I received the diagnosis and I was in the hospital for that extended period of time. And while I was there, I had most of my colon removed, which resulted in an ileostomy. So I also came out of the hospital feeling just like you described, where I just thought, well, okay, I'm alive and I'm happy to be alive. I can still do some things. But I also felt like I've got this ileostomy, so I just have to accept that the romantic part of my life is over. No one is ever going to want me. So I just tried to resolve within myself, okay, be grateful that I'm here, but there's zero chance that anybody is going to be interested in me romantically or physically. And that took me a long time. And I would say, early on, I didn't make the best choices when I did start to date because I was so grateful that anybody would be attracted to me that I didn't choose wisely. I kind of just took whoever. I was too open to people who maybe weren't the standards that I would usually want because I was just so grateful that, oh my gosh, somebody thinks that I'm attractive. And so it was a learning process over multiple years.
Thanks for being brave. I'm sure you and I could compare notes and write a book on that. And I'm sure we're not the only people, because when you don't feel that you're worthy or you have value, because something happens to us, it's not like we wanted it or we wished it. And by the way, it's more prevalent in children than it's ever been. So now there's more treatment options, which is a wonderful thing. So you get this diagnosis, you think you're never going to have any happy, healthy, substantial romantic relationship. What did you do with your time and your energy? Did you throw it into your career or education, or did you kind of just remove yourself from socializing? Maybe all of the above.
It was a little bit of all the above. I got my job at UC San Diego, where I ended up working for 33 years. And so I was very focused on my job and focused on that. And I slowly started to re-engage into a social life. It took quite a bit of time. The education part, I really lost that desire. I had been in a really great PhD program at Ohio State, and I had left it because I was sick, and I thought that I was dealing with a mental problem. And when I came out of the hospital, I found that I no longer had that burning desire for my PhD. And I think that in order to get a PhD, you have to have that burn. That's the only way that you can get through it. So I just accepted that I had my master's, and that was going to be as far as my education went. And I jumped into my career and my non-romantic friendships.
And it sounds like you were just looking to see where is their value. And the fact that you decided not to go through with the PhD program, I really applaud you for that, because to your point, you do have to be totally committed to doing it. And I know for me, I went through with mine, but I think I was even hiding in it a little bit because I didn't have to actually deal with anyone on a one-to-one level. I could just be, I have to study, or I'm in school, or I'm working, whatever the case is. So at some point in your life, you had this surgery, and then what happened after the surgery? Did you say, well, I'm back to normal in a new way and everything's fine? Or did you go through some other emotional changes?
Thank you. I went through several of them. And I also have to give a lot of credit to Ralph Benershka, who many of us in the IBD world know. He was a star with the San Diego Chargers. He was a kicker. And he went through ulcerative colitis very publicly and had ostomy surgery. And he played in the NFL for 5 years with his ostomy. And he's been so helpful to many people. And my doctor, at some point, I explained to my doctor my feelings about myself and that no one would ever be interested in me. And he was like, you need to talk to Ralph Benershka. So he connected us, and Ralph spoke to me on the phone several times and was so encouraging and shared about his experiences. And he went through the same thing, but he talked about the importance, and he really stressed to me the importance of telling someone early on about my surgery. And I remember one time I had just started dating. I was really putting my toes in the water, and I called Ralph and I said, oh my gosh, I met somebody. I went out on a date. And he's like, well, did you tell him? And I said, no, but I'm going to tell him. I'll tell him. And he was like, you have to tell him. And so he was a wonderful mixture of kindness, grace, sharing his story, and also really guiding me and holding my feet to the fire. Like, you cannot avoid this. You have to deal with it. So I did, and I was terrified. And, not that particular relationship didn't even lead to a physical relationship, but I found that as I was dating people and starting to date people, I would be terrified to tell them and stress and not sleep at night and think about it, overthink it. And then when I would tell people, I actually found that, with only one exception, that people were extremely understanding and kind about it. There was one person who said to me, I can't deal with that. He said, I feel like a woman's body should be a work of art, and this is just not going to work for me. And that was very painful to hear. It's his right to do that. He absolutely had the choice, and it's his right, and I respect that. It was just very painful for me to hear that. But outside of that example, I found that I had overblown it, and that actually, in general, people are much more understanding and kind than I was giving them credit for.
A few things to the points you just made. First of all, Rolf has actually been a guest on some of our shows, and one of our team members, Justin Rugliani, actually had a similar situation, and Rolf reached out to him, and they met in person. So here's to Rolf, because he really is an inspiration.
Yes.
I feel like from what you shared, you've had better luck than I have when it comes to that, because I was told you're dirty, you're disgusting, even without seeing anything. It was just me talking about the story. And I think what happens is there is a fear in people, and they think, oh my gosh, well, what happens if she does have an accident, or what happens if I have to get involved and deal with it? And people don't want to deal with it. They don't understand what it is. And so I say, you know what? Sayonara, goodbye. I don't even want to know you, because if that's what your response is to something that is not my fault, then I'm glad that you have your own path and I have mine. So today, you and I are really here to encourage people to realize you can be productive, you can be successful, and you can be happy. And I mentioned at the beginning of the show that you have a very successful career. You're in another chapter of your career as an inventor, and you've got some other things that you're working on that are coming out shortly. Tell us when you first realized that you could be an inventor, because that's something, it's like, what are you talking about? How can anyone invent something and get it produced and then have a viable business? So tell us, first of all, what is it that you invented, and when did you realize that you had something?
Yes, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I totally agree. I think it's so important to encourage other people that they can take the step and they can really do anything that they want. And so for me, I am now 66. I started as an inventor when I was 53, and I invented the ring thing. And thank you for showing it there. That's my website. It's a waterproof ring holder that I invented to keep rings safe whenever you have to take them off. So for me, it started in the nail salon. I was getting a manicure and I needed to take my rings off for the manicure, and I had nowhere safe to put them. And then I found I had the same problem at the gym and at the massage parlor and when I was traveling, and so many situations, even at home. I wanted to take my rings off sometime to do cleaning, and I was just tucking them away, and there wasn't anything available. This was in 2013. So I thought about it, and I think that having spent my career working with scientists, I really had the belief that you can think of something and pursue it. So this was something that was totally different than anything I had ever done. And I thought, I'm just going to try. I don't know where this is going to lead, but I am going to try. And I hired an engineering student to help me with the first drawings and the first 3D models, and it went from there. I think it was just the background that I had of working with scientists who are always doing experiments and always trying something new, and not everything works out, but they keep trying. And I think that's what really led me to think, I don't know what I'm doing, but I am going to give it a shot.
And was there any point when you said to yourself, well, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, I had this surgery, so that I'm out, I'm eliminated, there's no way I could become an inventor?
No, thank goodness. No, that never happened. No.
Okay, bravo. So to anybody who's out there, whatever it is that you're going through in life, that doesn't mean that there can't be another chapter. That doesn't mean that you can't take whatever you've been through and you're going through and package it up into energy and momentum to move forward with something else. So how are you doing today in terms of your Crohn's disease? For people who don't know, they might not understand, when you have an operation, does that mean that you don't have the symptoms, you don't have the disease? How does it work?
Yes, everyone's a little bit different. And so for me, I am one of the probably 15% of people with Crohn's disease who only have it in their colon. Most people have it in their small intestine and their large intestine, and they deal with outbreaks their whole life and really suffer and deal with that continuously. Mine was limited to my colon. So with my colon being removed, I don't have any ongoing outbreaks of it. I do have an ileostomy, which is, for people who don't know, it's like a colostomy. It's a bag on my side. And excuse me, for me, what I really face is ostomy management. So when I'm working out, for example, some years ago, I ran the Rock and Roll Marathon twice, and I did marathon training, and I completed the marathon both times, but I had to get some counseling on how do I keep myself hydrated, because dehydration is a significant issue when you have an ileostomy and you don't have your colon to absorb liquid and absorb water and hydration. So I really had to be mindful about how am I going to finish this race and not come across the line significantly dehydrated. I also rafted through the Grand Canyon with my family, and I had to arrange ahead of time to have some accommodations made for emptying my bag along the way. And, I have had situations where I've been in work settings and my bag has leaked. that's a reality sometimes of having an ostomy bag. So I always carry extra supplies with me. One of the things for me about working in the medical field is that in general, people have been understanding. So maybe I'm working with a nurse on a clinical trial and my bag leaked. I remember this was at Columbia University, and I just had to say to her, oh my gosh, my ostomy bag is leaking. I need to excuse myself for a few minutes. And I had my emergency supplies with me, and I could go to the restroom and change my bag. And some those experiences of having to explain to other people why I need counseling on hydration, why I need a little bit of accommodation, have also made me more comfortable letting people know that I have the ostomy. And now I'm doing great. I work out at a boxing gym several times a week. I lift weights. And what I have to do is always be mindful. And when I lift weights, or even with the boxing gym, I just have to let people know, for boxing, nobody can even pretend to hit me in the stomach, because it's easy to make a mistake and actually hit someone in the stomach. And they cannot do that. When I'm lifting weights, if I'm working with a trainer, we have to be mindful about, I can go heavy, but I can't strain, because that is really bad for the ostomy. So it's a matter of, at each step, doing the best that I can and making whatever accommodations I need and being open with people.
You've come a long way from what you shared about not wanting to tell anyone.
Yes.
And I really admire the fact that you just put it out there for our audience, because this is what it is. This is the way your life is. This is what you're living. And I think when we get to a point where we just share that, everyone's not always comfortable with it, by the way, because I just had an accident myself. I think I told you about it. It was maybe 2 weeks ago. And what I found is, when my bladder's full, if I don't go, then might not be that pretty, because the first part impacts the second part. And so that was the case. And so I actually had an accident, and I had all my supplies with me, but it's still, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say deteriorating, but it's not that. It's that moment when you're sitting there and you feel like, could it be any worse? And of course it always could be, but in that moment, it's just, there's a word that I'm thinking of that goes with this, but I'm not going to say this with an SH, but it's kind of like, okay, people are dealing with a lot worse things than this, right? So I think it's also the awareness of what could happen and being prepared. And at the same time, we can't let it bother us every single day, because we won't be able to get anything done. So I want to move on to the fact that children are diagnosed with these diseases, which is horrific, because until there is a cure, then they will have this for their entire life. Now, there are a lot of drugs, depending if it's Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or IBD, there's different treatment paths that you can go on. And the Crohn's Colitis Foundation really helped save my life in 2018. And they provide a lot of care, a lot of information. But what would you say, Kimberly, to someone out there who has a child who is diagnosed? And I don't have children, you don't have children, but yet we have compassion and we have understanding. And they might think, oh my gosh, like their whole life they're going to be living with this.
Yes, I agree. I absolutely agree. I would say a couple of things. One is, I would say, believe them. If a child is telling you that they hurt, or something isn't right, or I have to go to the bathroom right now, even though they may have just gone, always believe them. I think that as a young person, being doubted creates a whole world of problems, both trusting yourself and trusting other people, and also accommodating illness. I think it's really important that parents and anybody, any adult, believe the children when they tell us that they're not feeling well. I also think it's okay to question doctors. And so often in our lives, we look at our doctors as the people who know everything. And obviously they do. They know more than we do, and they've been trained. It's still okay to question them. And I think about myself. When I was 14, I was diagnosed with what they said was chronic appendicitis, because I was having stomach pain. And the doctor in the little town in Northern California said, oh, you have chronic appendicitis. And so they scheduled my appendectomy and took it out, and I continued to have pain. And then they told me I had phantom organ syndrome, just like when people have an arm removed and they still feel their arm. He said, you're having phantom organ syndrome and you're still feeling your appendix, even though it's not there, and it will just go away. And now, of course, I know there is no such thing as chronic appendicitis, and there is no phantom organ pain syndrome that somebody can have. And, and my parents, I don't mean to criticize my parents, because they were just dealing with the information that they were given. I do think in retrospect, it would have been okay to question the doctors, or maybe go get a second opinion and go to someone else and say, I hear what you're saying, but this doesn't seem quite right with my child's situation, and go and see somebody else. So those are two things that come to my mind immediately: is believe the children when they tell us about their symptoms, and it's okay to question doctors and get a second opinion.
Excellent advice. And I'm so sorry that you went through that. I mean, and have an operation and be told that afterwards, it's unbelievable. And these things go on, and yet you're still happy, you're still pleasant, you're not walking around with an axe to grind. It's beautiful attitude. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I feel very lucky. Although, of course, no one wishes to have an ostomy. No one wishes to have IBD. All in all, I feel extremely lucky that it was eventually diagnosed and I'm doing okay. I do deal with the ostomy management, but just as you were saying in your situation that you recently experienced, there are people who are dealing with much worse things. And so I actually feel grateful that I came out of it as well as I did, and that it's not worse, because it certainly could be worse.
Very true. And one thing that I just want to share, and I'd love your thoughts on this. What I've realized is, I said this a little bit earlier, is not everybody wants to hear about it. So even though like what I went through a couple weeks ago was really traumatic, because I still had to clean myself up, get changed, and go do something, which I'm not going to go into what it was, because I know people be like, what? Anyway, I told one or two people after the fact, and they didn't want to hear about it. They're like, oh my God, please. They said, I don't want to hear about it. And I thought, you know what? Not everyone can deal with it. So I'm given this disease because I'm the one who can deal with it. So I realized I don't need external validation or for someone to say, hey, I'm so sorry that you went through that, because they just don't want to talk about it because it makes them feel uncomfortable. So what are your thoughts about that?
I 100% agree with you. I totally agree. And I'm very sorry that you had to go through that. That's just as you said, it's a demoralizing situation to be in. And you had your supplies with you, you dealt with it and went on, and, you've accomplished so much. And so I think, and you're right, that it makes people uncomfortable, because it does make them think, what, it could be me. What if it were me? And I think I don't mean to be critical of other people, but I think it shows a certain lack of empathy, that they can't put themselves in your situation. They're just thinking about themselves, and they're thinking, oh man, I don't want to even think about that, because I don't know how I would deal with that. I don't even want to think about that happening to me. And that makes them think about themselves and not about you, and considering your feelings and being open to listening to just hearing you and acknowledging what you went through. So I think you're right that we do have to be sensitive and say it, and maybe say it once. Like I never feel bad about saying it and sharing my truth. And if I can feel that the other person isn't interested or isn't open to it, okay, I'll stop. But I'm not shy about taking that first step and sharing what's my truth in my situation. But I do think it's more telling about them and their perspective on things and how they respond.
I completely agree with you. It's almost like we have to be therapists, because we have to understand how and why the other person is acting the way that they're acting. And meanwhile, we really just want, I'll speak for myself, some compassion and empathy, and say, wow, I'm really sorry you had to deal with that. And I know I've told you this before, but one time, my body just decided to do what it wanted to do. I was completely dressed up, and I was at a restaurant, and I was with two other people, and you know what happens. And they literally got up and left me there. They left. They didn't pay the check, anything, nothing. They were just horrified. And I remember, I can still see myself in that restaurant, in that booth. And it was one of the lowest moments in my life, not because of just what happened to my body, but because the two people, it was a personal lunch, it wasn't a dinner, because they left me there. They just
Yeah.
left me to fend for myself. And don't do that, people out there. I'm just saying, like, have some compassion for people. Like, everyone's going through something. And instead of judging someone, offer to help in some way. I mean, I know everything isn't always pleasant and perfect, but that's part of life. And I really feel like that, Kimberly, supporting someone, being there for someone, it could be life changing.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm curious to know, like, what happened the next time you spoke to those people?
Well, I brought it up to the one person was friends with the other, and I brought it up to her, and she said I couldn't deal with it. She said, I thought it was disgusting. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't deal with it. And the first thing I thought was, like, let me get away from you. And the person never even called me. I called them. They didn't even call me to see how I was doing. So it ended up, I forgave the person. And I did say, your leaving me was worse than me going through that, because you basically took a rubber stamp and said, you are disgusting. I don't want anything to do with you. I said, but really, it's about you, because you showed me who you are. And I'm not judging you, but by doing what you did, you basically said, you're not a good friend, that I can't trust you, that your ego came first. And she said she just was terrified and didn't know what to do.
Wow. I'm so glad that you talked to her. Hopefully, if she's in a situation like that again with someone, where whether it's that same situation or something else, whatever that she feels uncomfortable about, she'll think twice before just getting up and walking away from the person, because it's unkind. It's just unkind.
Yeah, I think she learned something from it. But for people who are thinking of a support group, okay, I ran a support group for years. It's a good place to come together and share. Many people don't feel comfortable. So what are your thoughts about support groups? Have you ever been part of one? And if so, what was your experience?
I was part of one very briefly in the very beginning. For me, there was nobody in the group who was in exactly my situation. It was an IBD support group. And so it was very helpful to hear about other people's experiences and what they were going through and how they dealt with it. And that part was helpful. It's just that a lot of what they were sharing wasn't applicable to me. Like, people with IBD often, have to be very close to a bathroom all the time just for what we're talking about, and I have great empathy for that. That's not my situation, because with the bag, I have more control over when I empty it, when I need to get to the bathroom, and my issues about body image and all of that are a little bit different than the people, at least in that support group. And so I stayed for a while and I got a lot out of it, but then there was a point when I just got busy with life, and I just decided to kind of keep on going on my own.
And I give you a lot of credit for that, because you gave it a try. You said, let me see. And what I found, and by the way, they told me this at the Crohn's Colitis Foundation, one of the executives that I was volunteering for everything. I was actively involved. And the person said, when you start to feel better, you probably are not going to want to do all of these things. But when you're not feeling well, it feels so good to have a community. And what ended up happening was the pandemic hit, and I was running 2 support groups, but there was a period of time when I actually started feeling better, and somebody else wanted to come and take it over. And I was just as happy, because I really didn't want to be reminded of it every day, if that makes sense. It's kind of like, okay, well, now I feel well, because I've had ulcerative colitis for 35 years. And of the 35 years, I would say I'm sick 6 months of every year. So the last time I was sick, I hate to even put this out in the universe, but the last time I was sick was a year ago, and I was really sick. It was probably the worst I've ever been. And I've been told you have to go to the hospital, you're going to need surgery, you have to go on biologics. And I just said to myself, I am not doing it. I will literally will myself back to health. So I've been on the same medicine for 35 years, but I have to say a lot of the time I was on steroids. So for the last maybe 7 years, they won't even give me steroids, but steroids were like, boom, take the prednisone and you're feeling well, even though you have a balloon face and all these things going on with you. But now I've totally changed my diet. So that's where I want to go with you next. Do you take any measures that you are thinking of your colon and saying, oh, colon, I want to do the best that I can for you? Are you taking your food choices into consideration because of this? Or are you able to just eat and drink whatever you want?
I do take it into consideration. I think it's a really important point that you're bringing up, and self-care in general is so important. I think especially when you have IBD and you have to be very aware of your body. For me, a couple of the things that I really pay attention to are hydration all the time. I mentioned it when I was training for the marathon, but I also do it just all the time to make sure I'm hydrated. There are certain foods that I can't eat because they just will not pass through my ostomy, like corn is the worst. Like I've ended up in the hospital with a blockage because I ate one of those little mini corn on the cob things, and it just gets stuck and it will not come out. And so for me, it's a physical, I know that there's certain things, and bran is an absolute no-no. And so I try to be very mindful of my food, and it's an interesting balance because for me, the things that work best with my digestive system are not always the healthiest. Like mashed potatoes are great. Mashed potatoes and gravy are fantastic. And, cheeseburgers are really good. And, that passes through and does great, but that's not good for my health. So I'm always doing this balance of like, okay, what am I going to be able to digest and what is healthy for me overall? So I just try to stay away from the things that I know are not good. And I do not try to push it. I'm not interested in taking that. There's no bite of anything I can eat that's worth the chance of having a problem and ending up in the hospital with a blockage.
Absolutely. I think that's really good information for our audience. And something that I want to add to that is I've totally changed my diet and what I eat. I eat the exact same thing every single day. But this one day, about 3 weeks ago, I went to pick up my protein powder. And what I didn't realize was that there were 4 different types of protein powders. The containers all look the same, except there's a name across the bottom of the type. And so I was not feeling well. This is when the situation happened that I was telling you about. And so for 2 weeks, I was running to the bathroom constantly. And I thought, I don't even know how I can leave home, because this is how it used to be in the old days where, you're kind of stuck at home, which most of my career I've worked from home. And I thought something's wrong. And then I looked at the package and it was a vegan protein. So I did some research with AI, and it turns out that there were all of these components in there that were very different than what was in the whey protein. And so something or things in there was causing my colon, my digestive system to be very, very unhappy with me. I mean, they were protesting. And so when I switched back to the other one, all is well. So my point being that even though anyone might be eating in a healthy manner, you could be eating something that just doesn't agree with your system. And maybe even by identifying that, you might be able to cut back on the flares, or maybe it's an allergy to food. You don't know.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And I think it also comes up, and with self-care comes standing up for yourself. So if you're in a situation with other people and maybe you're out for dinner and everybody at the table is, hey, let's try this thing. If it doesn't work for you to eat it, or it's risky, it's really okay to say, you all enjoy it. I hope it's wonderful. I'm going to just stick with my, whatever your usual thing is. Like, it's really okay to find what works for you and is healthy, and stick with it, and not give in to any peer pressure about having to try something else. Like you're saying, Dr. Jacalyn, you found food that works for you and you're sticking with that. And look, you've gone this period of time without a flare, and we don't know exactly why, but that could very well be one of the pillars that's keeping you healthy.
It's true. In fact, last year I went for my colonoscopy, and I shared this, I think, before on one of our programs, but I had canceled it 3 times because the results were not what I wanted. In other words, some of the markers were very high. The white blood cells were very high. And I just, for a year, I just didn't feel like dealing with it. I dealt with taking care of my mother for 3.5 years. I moved, I was flooded twice. And I just kind of put my head in the sand, believe it or not. And I just said, I don't feel like dealing with it. So when I finally went this year in March, I had already changed my diet. I had given up alcohol, which tomorrow is 120 days, yay, and sugar. And so my markers, my blood tests were excellent. And I thought to myself, there must be some correlation between what you're eating and what your test results are. So that's kind of what keeps me on this path of what I'm eating today. Because as I mentioned, it's the same exact food every single day. And some people might say that is so boring, and it's not that it's boring. It's keeping me healthy. So I have to go for another colonoscopy in June. I think I have to go like every 3 months just to make sure everything's always fine. But if it comes back again that it's good, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing because I don't want to mess with it.
No, good for you for finding it. And do you find that when you're out with other people, do you get pressure ever to like, are you going to have something different, or do you want to try something? Try this, just have a bite of this, or
Well, I never go out to dinner since I started in January with no alcohol, no sugar, and no caffeine for 30 years. I mean, I could go on and on about all the no's, but I've only gone out to lunch, and I only go to the same place, Seasons 52, because everything they have is healthy, and I only order the salmon, and I only get it a certain way. And the woman who waits on me, she knows, okay, it's just like, she knows exactly what it is that I want. So no, I never get any pressure. And to me, at this stage in my life, I don't want to go back to every time I leave home being like, oh my God, is today the day that it comes back? Because if it's coming back, it's coming back for a while. It's not like one and done. And by the way, I wanted to say something about that, what you had mentioned before. I have been told previously in my corporate career, can't you just take some Pepto-Bismol? I don't understand. No, you cannot take Pepto-Bismol. That is not working. So people come up with what they think is a great answer, but it's not. It's your digestive system is freaking out. It's in chaos. And by the way, people don't even realize until you have to do a colon cleanse, or maybe you're getting ready for colonoscopy, how much stuff is inside our intestines, how long our intestines are, and they're packed with food, and it takes a long time to process it. So we have to be, everyone really think about what are you putting in your body, because our body has a function. Each part has functions to do, and we're not helping it by giving it things that are unhealthy.
No, it's so true. I think one of the hidden blessings of having an illness like this is that if you listen to things, and you're a great example of doing that, you can find ways to really support yourself and be kind to yourself and say, what's going to work for me, whether it's exercise, diet, all of those things, getting enough sleep. Like some of the basic things that keep us healthy are so, so important. And it's very easy for us to let those go by the wayside. And I think when you really are trying to be as healthy as you can in the face of a chronic illness, it makes it even more important that you do those things.
I have really thoroughly and completely enjoyed this episode, and just sharing, swapping stories with you about things that we have been going through and are going through. And so what would you like to say as the host of the Persistence Payoff Show here at USA Global TV and Radio? How would you like to close out this episode for anybody out there who might be struggling? They might be, I don't know if I have IBD or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, and I feel afraid. I don't know what to do.
Yes. Well, thank you. And I, persistence is a really important quality for me personally. And I see that in other people. And that's part of why I love the Persistence Payoff Show, is getting to hear people's stories. And one of the themes that comes up, not only for myself, but I hear it in the guests over and over again, is the importance of persisting through challenges, persisting through finding what's the right solution for you and what is the right path. And so I would say to anybody who's dealing with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease or a chronic condition, is really keep persisting. Even when you feel like there may be no hope, you may feel like nobody's listening to you, that you're just hurting all of the time. All of those things, well, there's never no hope, but it may be that people aren't listening to you right now, and you may be in pain, and there is hope. So I would say keep persisting and believing in yourself, and take care of yourself, and keep going. If your doctor isn't giving you the information that is helpful, find somebody else, or go find a support group, or keep persisting through whatever challenges you're facing. Keep persisting and believe in yourself and take care of yourself.
Beautiful words to close out our program today. Thank you very much. Kimberly, look forward to seeing you on an upcoming episode of the Persistence Payoff Show. People can find it over on our YouTube channels, which I will bring up the graphic. They are USA Global TV and Radio and Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Please do subscribe to our channels. We'd love to have you in our community. Thank you again. Look forward to seeing you on a future episode. Bye for now, Kimberly.
Bye-bye.
I have written a book, coincidentally, which is called My Tummy Hurts. And this is little Jackie. And that's actually me in my dress from when I was a little girl. And it's a story of a little girl named Jackie who has stomach problems. And she's ashamed, and she feels upset and shy and confused. And she actually goes to the school nurse and then to the doctor, and she gets a diagnosis of ulcerative colitis. So you can see there are very big pictures, and it's dyslexic font. So there's information here for people who are interested in being able to talk to their children about when their tummy hurts, that we don't just dismiss them and say, go to your room, it's in your head, I don't want to hear about it. There could be a real problem there. So getting a determination, learning how to handle a diagnosis, and just realizing that you're not alone, that there are people all over the world. In fact, I was in Vienna last summer, and I went for a walk, and I walked past this building, and it had a sign, a marquee, Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So it's like right there. It was just good to know that the Crohn's Colitis Foundation has a worldwide presence, and they have helped me extensively. So you can go over to their website, which we will drop into the comments, crohnsandcolitisfoundation.org, and there are plenty of resources there. Do not live in fear. Go and get some help. There are people who will help you, who will listen, people like Kimberly, Rolf, myself, Justin. We really believe in giving you a place to share your story. So please consider going to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation and asking for help, asking for more information. If you feel so moved, you can go and pick up a copy of my book in bookstores or on Amazon. Thank you again for being here. I really do appreciate it. We're going to close out with a few comments from Tracy Cram Perkins, one of her books, which is called Dementia Home Care Before, During, and After. My mother had Alzheimer's. She had dementia. It was a lot to deal with, to love someone, to care for someone, and to watch her lose her mind. It's a very difficult thing, and I really didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, but Tracy's book helped me exponentially, and I'm sure that will help you. I've actually given my book to other people who've given it to other people, and so on and so forth, because more and more people are getting these diagnoses, and I think it makes a sense for us to help one another. Let's take a look. USA Global TV and Radio proudly presents Tracy Cram Perkins, a dementia caregiving survivor teaching how to balance care with peace of mind. #1 resource for dementia caregivers. It's the book, Dementia Home Care, How to Prepare Before, During, and After. Over 17,000 copies sold of this must-have guide. And now a testimonial from Tracy Smith.
If I was to describe this book to someone who is going through a similar situation, I would underscore how important it is to have some sort of a tool or a guidebook to help you through certain stages. And there's so many, it's such an unknown topic to the average person. And to have this as a reference is essential. It's going to help you get through it personally, as well as help your loved one manage.
To learn more, go to TracyCramPerkins.com. Tracy Cram Perkins is an award-winning author. She's also the host of Dementia Home Care television show. Watch it here on USA Global TV and Radio. My Tummy Hurts by Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Meet Jackie. She loves recess, running with friends and laughing on the playground. At school, Jackie tries to play like she always does, but suddenly the pain comes back. Lately, something feels different and her tummy hurts, sometimes a little and sometimes a lot. With the help of a caring teacher, a nurse, her mom, and a kind doctor, Jackie begins to understand what her body is trying to tell her. Sometimes tummy pain is more than a simple bellyache. Some children live with conditions like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. Jackie listens to her body. She asks for help. She knows she's not alone. And Jackie finds her way back to running, laughing, and being herself. My Tummy Hurts, a kid's guide to bellyaches and bathroom troubles by Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, available on Amazon and in fine bookstores around the world.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at USAGlobalTV.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/USAGlobalTV. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.